look at chapter 11, we remember that chapter 11 of John's Gospel is where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. And Lazarus and Mary and Martha were intimate friends and companions of Jesus. And this raising of the dead with the Jewish authorities was not very popular. Jesus was getting more and more popular. He was sort of upsetting the fruit basket. It was making some of the Jewish authorities very nervous. And raising somebody from the dead was just too much for them. So after that, they put a bounty on his head, literally. And they knew that the Passover was coming, will be celebrated in Jerusalem, and every good Jew would be there. And so there is this buzz right in the verses right before chapter 12 that say he surely wouldn't show his face in Jerusalem. Surely he wouldn't, because there's a bounty on his head. So the air is sort of thick with tension and intensity, because Jesus has been hiding out, laying low after the raising of Lazarus, and now he's on his way to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover, knowing very well that he will face the cross when he gets there. And I believe the people who were around him would have known that too. And I think Mary was paying attention. I think it's possible that the disciples were in a little bit of denial. We love the disciples, but sometimes they're a little slow to catch on every once in a while. But I think Mary was paying attention. She was reading the signs. She knew what was going on. And so she risked no expense and lavished Jesus with this amazing offering of her heart, because she knew that time was short and she might not even see Jesus again. Now I realize that common interpretation of this passage says that she's anointing him for his burial. And while that might be true, to be honest, I don't think it goes deep enough. I don't think it actually honors the medicinal healing that Mary may have been doing with the oil that she chose to use, which was nard or spikenard. And for those of you who have studied or practiced Chinese medicine, this might make more sense to you than it would perhaps to people in another context. For you know that there are medicinal healing properties in plants and in oils that can even be applied topically to affect the mind, body, and spirit, right? I mean, my acupuncturist is often prescribing things that other people might kind of raise their eyebrows at, but it's the healing properties of plants that also have an impact on the body. Well, all cultures that lived close to the earth would have understood this. And there's a woman who wrote a wonderful book, Linda L. Smith, Healing Oils, Healing Hands, and it talks about the forgotten science of essential oils in the Bible. There are over 1,000 references to healing oils, medicinal plants, in the Bible, and it was an art that was kind of forgotten in modernity. But the people of that time, and women in particular, it would have been a common practice for them to use oils in a healing way, in a medicinal way. And one of those would be nard or spikenard. And so it's very interesting. Listen to what the properties of spikenard do. For the body, it calms the nervous system and the heart. For the mind and spirit, spikenard calms the heart, stabilizes the mind, and helps settle the emotions. It has a decidedly calming effect, instilling a profound sense of peace. Spikenard can be used to encourage positive emotions of forgiveness, calm, centering, balance, and resolution. Don't you find that interesting? To me, that gives an entirely different take on this passage. For me, it says that Mary knew full well what she was doing. And this was an amazing gift of her heart to minister to Jesus, to help strengthen him for what he would face when he went ahead. She knew that this was his last stop before his death, and she wanted to give this outpouring of her heart, something that would encourage him out of her deep and tremendous love for him, out of her tremendous gratitude for what he had given in her life. And we are told that it was worth about 300 denarii, which would have been about a year's wage. So imagine that oil being worth, at modest estimates, about $50,000. If you had a jar of oil worth $50,000, what would you do with it? A little teeny drop. Every once in a while you lose it very sparingly, right? What does Mary do? She breaks open the whole jar, lavishes all of it on Jesus. She spares no expense because her heart was open and she was present to the moment. Now, of course, there is an objection for this. Not only because of the expense, but because she breaks all convention to do it. She's a woman. She's touching Jesus in a very intimate way. She lets her hair down. She wipes them with her hair. It's a very sensual act that, again, she broke all convention doing it and would have been criticized for. And here she's criticized by Judas, who says that the money should have been used for the poor. And Jesus gives this very interesting response. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. not care about the poor? Well, of course we know that's not true. It's Jesus. He lived his whole life dedicated to helping the poor. I think on one level he's saying that there will always be things that need to be done. There will always be tasks that we have to do that are important tasks, but they'll still be there tomorrow. There are times when there's an important moment, an opportune moment that we don't want to miss, that if we're paying attention to God's Spirit, we need to act on that. We need to take that opportunity. And there are times when the matters of the heart in the moment are more important than the tasks that need to be done, because those moments might not come again. I believe Jesus is inviting us to risk opening our hearts. The same woman I mentioned earlier, Angeles Arian, has a famous quote that is used that says, "The greatest regret in life is love unexpressed." The greatest regret in life is love unexpressed. Not the tasks we've left undone, not the things we didn't finish when we look back on our life. But the greatest regret is love unexpressed. And death can be a good teacher of that. I learned this lesson from a dear friend of mine named Teresa. We went to high school together and we were on the same track team. We were very involved in our church youth group. She was diagnosed with cancer at age 28. By the time we found it, it had gone all through her body, and she went downhill in a matter of weeks. During that time, I moved 3 times in 3 months. It was before cell phone and email, and her family had a hard time getting a hold of me. They were in Washington. By the time I found out, she only had a couple days left. And when I finally caught up with her in the hospital, I was full of apologies that I hadn't found out sooner, and the only thing she wanted me to know, her urgent message to me, was that she loved me. She so wanted to tell me before she died that she loved me and she wanted to get a hold of me so she could share that message with me. The greatest regret in life is love unexpressed. Mary didn't lose that opportunity. She took it, she seized it, her heart was open, she spared no expense. She did this unconventional thing to show her love for Jesus. And Jesus received it. That's another important lesson for us to see in this passage. He didn't shun it. He didn't turn her away. He didn't say, "Oh, that's too much. I'm uncomfortable with that." He looked through the unconventional act and saw her heart. And he accepted that as the good and precious and wonderful gift. And there's a lesson for us from all 3 characters in this story. From Jesus and Mary, but from Judas as well. Because I have to examine myself as I look at this passage that there are times when I might be like Judas, when I might be so task-oriented that I am tempted to miss over the moment, when I might be tempted to criticize either myself or another and say, "Oh, this is just too much," or "This is unconventional," or "I'm kind of on my one-track mind here." But Jesus and Mary invite us to remember what's really important, what has heart and meaning, and to express that love when we have a chance. And it might not just be at someone's bedside as they're about to cross over. It might be little things, little acts in the moment. An act of appreciation, or when we feel on our heart that we need to reach out someone, or when we feel God calling us to take a risk. Because to express love or appreciation or even gratitude sometimes is a risk. We have to make ourselves vulnerable. We might be afraid that there might be a rejection. But if God calls us in that moment to act or to have an opportunity to share love, then I believe the story of Jesus and Mary reminds us today that we need to seize that. We need to seize the day and take that opportunity. So I would invite us in this Lenten season as we reflect to ask the question, how is God preparing our hearts for something new? Just like before Chinese New Year, we might clean our homes, how is God inviting us to open our hearts, to maybe release any wounds or any hurts or any bitterness of the past, to open up to a new thing, to let love heal our lives, to be reconciled and mended and put together for something new. I pray that God gives us the courage to be present to God's healing power and love this day.